Rain tapped softly on the skylight of the studio, the only sound in an otherwise silent room. Julian Mercer stood before his latest masterpiece, or rather, his latest deception. A Caravaggio, forged to perfection, aged with soot and tobacco, framed in worm-eaten oak salvaged from a 17th century mirror. To the untrained eye, and most of the trained ones, it was authentic. It had to be. The buyer was paying 7 figures for it under the table, and the authentication had already come from Gregory Vale, London's most feared and revered art critic. Gregory had signed off on it publicly, and with praise that would make a real Caravaggio blush. Julian had watched the review roll in with a mixture of triumph and unease. Too much, he thought. He's overselling it. But it was too late to pull back. A week later, Gregory was found dead in his townhouse, face down in a pool of blood, the walls smeared with something strange, crimson fingerprints trailing toward a half-finished sentence scrawled on the mirror with lipstick. Not his brush. Julian felt the blood drain from his face when the news broke. Gregory had been murdered the night after unveiling the Caravaggio forgery at the Halberton Gallery. The press called it a robbery gone wrong, citing the broken window and missing watch. But Julian had seen the message. Not his brush. It couldn't be coincidence. Only 2 people alive knew the truth about the painting. Julian and Gregory. And Gregory, it seemed, had changed his mind too late. The message wasn't for the police. It was for someone who could understand it. Julian paced his studio, eyes darting over brushes, turpentine jars, and ragged books. He recalled the final conversation they'd had at the gallery's back room, whispered over glasses of dark wine. Gregory had stared too long at the canvas, his fingers brushing the surface. "You've outdone yourself," he'd said. But Caravaggio, he always signed with a sliver of madness. This one feels calculated. Julian had laughed it off then, but now that whisper haunted him. Not madness. Calculation. The police came to him, of course. They always sniffed around anyone connected to a murder victim. But Julian played the grieving acquaintance well. Gregory was a genius, he said, voice low. A tragedy. A senseless act. They asked about the painting. He lied smoothly. I only restored it, cleaned it. No idea where it came from originally, but he could see the doubt in Inspector Lerner's eyes. A woman with a librarian's smile and a detective's mind. She lingered on the painting, her fingers twitching as though she wanted to touch it. "You sure it's genuine?" she asked. Funny how his last review was on this. Julian forced a laugh. Art critics always die dramatically. But she didn't laugh. Instead, she asked for a photograph of the back of the canvas. That's when Julian knew she was smarter than most. The frame was 17th century, but the nails, the wood glue, modern, barely visible, but visible enough to someone who knew where to look. The pressure mounted over the following days. Julian's hands trembled when he tried to paint. At night, he'd replay every step he'd taken, every fingerprint left behind, every lie he'd told. And always, That sentence returned. Not his brush. What did Gregory mean? Not Caravaggio's brush, obviously, but could he have meant Julian's? That someone else had meddled with the painting? Or was it a trap? A final twist from a dying man who'd realized he'd been used? Julian returned to Gregory's townhouse, slipping past the police tape. In the study, the mirror still bore the faint stain of the message, now half erased by cleaning fluid. But Julian noticed something new. Hidden behind the frame, taped to the wall, was a small card, the kind found in museums. It read, "A master mimics the hand, not the soul. Look beneath the varnish." Gregory's voice echoed in Julian's mind. He hadn't written the message in lipstick for the world. He'd written it for Julian. 2 days later, Lerner returned with a warrant. The painting had been seized, analyzed, and declared a forgery. Exquisitely done, but with materials traceable to Julian's studio. The critic's lipstick had matched a tube found in Julian's trash. In the final interview, Lerner dropped the final blow. Gregory Vale was going to expose you, but someone got to him first. Or maybe he left just enough rope to hang you. Julian said nothing. There was no point. The forgery had been perfect, the murder less so. Gregory had died, yes, but he'd left behind his sharpest critique yet, not in print, but in blood and metaphor. As the cell door closed, Julian finally understood. In the world of art, the greatest signature is the one left behind by time, and he'd signed his crime in bold, brilliant red.